Greetings, nerds. This is CNN Nerd. I'm your host, Sarah Belmont, and with me, as always, is our Mr. Producer, Will Polk. How are you doing tonight, Will?
Doing very well, Sarah. How you doing this Thursday evening?
It's been a week. It's been
Yeah.
a long week, but we're here, and we got a lot to talk about. Unfortunately, not Doom Patrol, but that will come next week.
Yes. I am so looking forward to spending my Friday binging the first 3 episodes.
Yeah, I don't know if I'm going to binge them in all in one day. Depends on what happens this weekend, but I'll definitely by Monday have been caught up in
Yeah.
the 3rd season of Doom Patrol.
Yeah, I've been rewatching the first season and I realize it's such an amazing show, but it is one of those things. I'm glad they're spreading it out because there's a lot that goes on in those episodes, and if it were like a Netflix model of a release, it would be overwhelming sometimes to try to manage, because I know that first season was like 15 episodes. So
wow, I didn't even realize that, but yeah, it's interesting how streaming you kind of lose track almost. And I guess it's not because of streaming. It's just that any show that's not on the CW, you lose track of, because CW takes the most bizarre breaks.
Exactly.
They're doing fairly well with Stargirl, but we'll get to that little bit later. Batwoman dropped a new trailer this week.
Okay, what'd you think of it?
I liked it. It kind of, I mean, it was a good reminder of where things were left off, and how they're going to be kicking off this next season. Especially, it answers the question of what the heck do you do with Alice if she's in jail?
Yes.
Go ahead.
No, I was gonna say no. I was waiting. I was agreeing with you that I think they did do that, and also now that they've gotten past the whole where's Kate Kane thing, now the show can really just stand on its own without. I mean, obviously that shadow will be there, but it really seemed that they've turned the page on that story in this trailer. It looks like moving into season 3.
Yeah, they turned a page. They did leave it, though, with a pretty intense kiss at the end. That leaves that page not completely fully turned for some of these characters. So we'll see what happens.
Yeah.
But looking forward, glad it's coming out next month to fill up our TV content and just to change things up. I think part of the reason why I'm getting a bit bored is because I feel as though we're at the points in these seasons with these shows where it's like, okay, what is the end game here?
Yeah.
And we'll get into that a little bit more later on. I forgot the Emmys were this weekend.
I did too. I really did. The thing I was looking forward to this week was the Muhammad Ali documentary that was on PBS. That was sort of my appointment TV this week. Even though I know we had our, speaking of shows and where things are at that certain point, and I know Supergirl is going to, and I know some of our listeners have asked why we haven't been reviewing Supergirl this season, given that it's his final one. But I like you, the Emmys. I was like, oh yeah, I guess it is this Sunday.
But it worked out for me because the morning show just started to kick off its 2nd season on Apple TV. And so I'd already figured out, okay, I'm going to watch morning show, get my subscription, and then also I'm going to binge this show called Ted Lasso. And Saturday night, I sat down and I was thinking to myself, I'm like, I don't really know if I can do an hour of drama. I'm a bit exhausted. So half-hour comedy, I'll just start. Next thing I know, I'm like 7 episodes into the 1st season. I'm very curious of where it's going. And tonight, before we started recording, I just watched the last episode of the 2nd season that dropped. Really, like, if you couldn't tell by all of that, really enjoy this show. It's very charming.
Mm-hmm.
I do think the first season is better than second season. They played too many cards too quickly. Where they could have dragged some stuff out. They developed some really good team conflict because the show centers around a coach of a soccer team in Britain.
Mm-hmm.
And it's a fish out of water type of story. But some of the conflicts, the interrelationships, conflicts between the players, it was lacking that kind of conflict during the second season. But I get it now that I've seen the finale, what the point of the second season was. But yeah, overall, really nice binge. I understand exactly why it swept the Emmys.
Okay, yeah. I haven't seen it. I don't have Apple TV, so but everyone who's watched it basically, as you just summed up, definitely says it was the perfect show for the times that we're in right now, and really also just really praised just the concept and I guess every thing about it seems that whenever people watch it, they get through it and love it and can't wait for more.
Yeah, I think to describe this show would be just charming. There's an endearment about these characters and their dynamics. Probably because most of them have some type of accent. Some of them even a British accent. But there's this dysfunction and there's all of these flaws. They're very flawed characters. So it has a lot going for it. And it's worth, I would say it's worth doing the free trial of Apple TV. Just binge this because it's only half-hour episodes.
Okay, yes.
And a season. So it doesn't take long to get through it either.
Yeah. Yes, that's a good point. That's a very good point. Yeah, we may have to do that.
But on top of how I wasn't surprised that Ted Lasso just took home the bacon, I wasn't surprised that Josh O'Connor won for The Crown, nor Gillian Anderson. And The Crown got a lot of love.
Yeah. It got, I think it was like the Schitt's Creek this year as far as just racking up all the awards. Didn't Olivia Colman also win as well?
Yep, and then the actor who played
Toby.
He won because of a very specific scene in the season finale of Thor. Yeah. I'm not mad at it, but I'm also just, and it goes to a lot of the discussion that's occurred ever since the Emmys aired. I mean, we have all of these nominations for people of color, and nobody won.
Yeah. And
then we have all of these nominations for Wandavision, the most nominated show this year, 0 wins.
Yep. Handmaid's Tale is another one. I mean, even though it has probably run its course as far as prestige TV, but again, another named drama that in the past would have been a winner was also shut out. I mean, I think it was it had the most losses, I think, of any show this year. So and you're right. I mean, went from Oscar so white to Emmy so white. I know. I know Courtney B. Vance, I know we were talking about as we were putting the show notes together earlier this week. He did win a Creative Arts Emmy, but as far as the prime time, he did not. Michaela Cole, as far as I haven't seen the show, but everything I've heard about, I'm blanking on it'll come to me soon. But her show was another one where. Not only on the front side of the camera, but on the behind the camera, there were a lot of people shut out. And so It just seemed that when you look at the people who did win this year, it was Ted Lasso. I haven't watched it, but from everything I've heard about it, I really can't quibble with that show doing so well. But in some of the other categories, it just seemed that the voters just went with the lazy route and just went with what they know.
Yeah, I would agree with that. I like, as much as I adore season 4 of The Crown, Olivia Colman definitely doesn't need another award. And she wasn't the standout. Gillian Anderson owned the screen.
Yeah.
And so did the actress who played Diana that season.
Yeah.
So
I agree.
Yeah, and I think as much as those episodes were well written and well executed, like it's hard because, again, I love that season, but a part of me is like, but there was good television on. Lovecraft Country should have got something.
Yeah.
Like, it should have got something, in my opinion, because that, I still remember some scenes from those episodes. And I just, the whole Wandavision thing, like, come on. I didn't even, why the heck did it get nominated? Like, why?
Yeah.
Because you wanted MCU lovers to watch your show.
Pretty much.
Not that you were going to give it anything, because frankly, it didn't deserve anything, in my opinion. Loki. Now, if Loki gets nominated next year, better win something, because that show is brilliant.
Yeah. Well, I think I will say I think Lizzie did earn a nomination. I think in that category, clearly, I think she definitely should have gotten stronger consideration for the work that she did this season. But I think it's just endemic of the genre that it just doesn't, and the same with the Oscars. The genre really only gets these big recognitions few and far between. I mean, you have
played the Joker. I get it.
Yeah. I mean, there's Joaquin, but then also think about Heath Ledger, but his is posthumous. And then, we had, I guess, Return of the King. I think did it win Best Picture for Lord of the Rings, or was it nominated?
Yes. Yeah. It got it. All 3 of them were nominated, but they waited until the very last one to get. And then you do have Shape of Water, and it's true, genre television and movies, as good as they are not recognized, few and far between, which begs the question, why the heck is Suicide Squad a Oscar-winning film? But that's a whole nother conversation.
Yeah, I don't know how it is. But you're right about the MCU. I mean, it's like they just nominated like Black Panther and all these other films and now TV shows.
Awards. Black Panther won them. Yeah.
But it was all in costuming. It wasn't in the big categories.
Didn't it win score?
Yeah, but as I said, well, let's see. I think it was best costume, if I recall, but it may have won a score.
I feel like it did. But yeah, the technical ones, like, we're not talking, I don't know, maybe one day that's a bigger conversation about how do you rank these awards?
Yeah.
The other thing I just want to mention is Mayor of Easttown. I don't think you watched it, Will. I know
I watched 2 episodes and then I kind of checked out.
Yeah, it's a very slow show.
Yeah.
I disagree. I have no idea why Evan Peters won. I kind of get Kate Winslet, but also I feel as though you replace her with any actress, and like, I don't think she added anything to it. She did a good job, but nothing where I'm just like, damn, she should get an Emmy for this.
Yeah.
I I felt that way about some of her movie performances where I'm like, where's her Oscar? And then finally she got one for a stupid movie. But okay.
Do you think it was the physicality and the thing, given that, that Kate Winslet, and there is a certain ideal role that she has and plays and given with Mary of Easttown, she played against type, so to speak. Maybe you think that helped maybe give across the hump?
I wouldn't view that as her playing against type.
Yeah, that's true.
There's something, Kate Winslet, she's very interesting if you look at her career path, especially the older she's gotten. She tends to play her age, and so I did not find that this part was completely against type. Yeah, I just didn't. It was yeah, I don't know. I never thought about it through that lens, and I would have to think about it. But yeah, for me, it wasn't a role where I was thinking to myself, "Oh my God, why did they get her to play that role?"
Yeah.
It's just like, okay, everyone's doing TV these days. Got it.
Yeah, well, hey, it's steady work, especially given how movies get pushed back and contracts get broken. So.
And then the last piece of news is Tudum.
Yeah, Tudum. I guess the Netflix
version of the DC fandom, etc. is, and I'm reading this word for word of how Will wrote this, by the way, etc. is this Saturday, 20th.
Yeah. 2000. Hey, I'm sorry. I was in a hurry when I typed it. I was like, what one last thing. I just happened to see it on Twitter, and I was just like, oh yeah, we always talk about the big studio Comic-Con event. So I was like, let me just throw it on there just for fun. this may end up on a cutting room floor.
All right. Where shall we start? Let's talk about Titans.
Yes.
This further proves my ongoing point about Titans. This show, I want to get in the writer's room. I want to talk to the showrunner. Why do they keep making these choices? Of last week's episode, I didn't like. And then it ended on a big game-changing moment for the Titans that are in Gotham. So what do? They insert a Limbo episode where we're just following Tim, Donna, and Hank in Limbo.
Yeah.
And we also jump to Paradise Island to hang out with my least favorite character, Raven, who actually was not the worst part of this episode, which just proves.
See, I actually like this episode, but I completely agree with you with it fell back into their worst impulses with their season 1, where it was just like you're building up to something and then it jumps back. But yeah.
It's just so bipolar. And I get it, but I can't help but be mad at it because there's something about the way the first few episodes this season were written where it felt consistent and a natural build up to a climactic moment and made me like really pay attention to what was going on, that they still have yet to find that rhythm again because they're too busy trying to tell all of these different stories, and they keep trying. I think that's an effort not to become procedural. And so they insert these episodes that are about something kind of adjacent to the main story, but they're not doing it in a way where it's a good break for the viewers. It's more of a weird of like, okay, so even though this climactic moment is paused, we're going to hang out with these guys for a little bit because, we kind of have to.
Yeah.
We have to explain what's going on here. And And I just, and like this shouldn't be a surprise. Another thing that bothers me about this episode is the stakes that it just ruins. I've never been on board with Donna coming back. For a brief moment, I was like, oh shit, they're not going to bring back Hank too.
Well, I knew I thought that just from a practical matter, Hank was done because, the actor who plays Hank, Alan Richardson, is like Jack Reacher now. So he can't do both. Mm-hmm. So from a practical matter, I knew, that was not going to happen. And I think, but also I think just the way the story was going, what I was wondering as the episode was developing, especially when they were in Themyscira and the lead elder was talking about balance and having Rachel Raven rebuild the artwork in the little chamber there. Mm-hmm. I was wondering if it was one of those going to be the whenever they talked about the upside down tree and all the points of getting back from the afterlife or back out or out of limbo back to Earth. I was wondering if that was like going to be the bridge, and then it was going to basically come down to a scenario where Hank and Donna were going to basically stay back, and especially when they were fighting on the bridge.
Yep.
I thought the way the story was going to unfold was they will do this heroic sacrifice, and then Tim would then be the one that would be able to come back. And that's how I thought the story was going to unfold, but of course it didn't. And Donna basically and Tim both come back, and and then Donna saves Bruce, which
makes no sense.
Yeah, yeah.
Am I the only one who also forgot about that 2-minute scene at the very beginning of the episode? And then when we returned to it, it was like, oh, wait, why are we suddenly watching Bruce Wayne commit suicide? And then Donna comes in and you're just like, WEF.
Yeah. Well, because when I was wondering, I was like, okay, I recognize that Bruce is going to commit suicide early on when he was talking to his lawyer and everybody thought his affairs are in order and that kind of stuff. I was like, huh. So, he's changing his will, and I was trying to see, and when they, shot to it, and, it was indeed his last will and testament, which confirmed my thoughts. I was like, So, I had a couple of thoughts there. One was, okay, Bruce is going to try to kill himself. Two, I was like, well, maybe with all the stuff that is going down and him feeling completely guilty or trying to atone for messing up Jason and Dick and then had all these other kids in the database that he was looking at, prospective Robins. He was trying, he was going to change his estate to take care of those folks, or maybe divest Dick of his estate because he's just pissed off at him because of their falling out or something like that.
Yeah.
But I think the way that it ended with him indeed trying to commit suicide, and having Donna of all people come back to rescue him, I guess it will give Bruce that second chance to be like, okay, I messed up the last time, but this time I'm going to do right by these folks and come back, because the version of the Bruce that we've had in Titans is a very broken, old, just burnt out Bruce Wayne versus what we've seen in other live action iterations of him. So I think this is sort of, so there's several redemption arcs going on in this season, and one of those redemption arcs is going to be Bruce's.
Well, The sad thing is, I don't really care about a redemption arc for Bruce Wayne because he's not a Titan, and this show is called Titans and should be about redemption arcs of the Titans. Who cares about Bruce Wayne?
Yeah, true.
Plus,
but
the Batman is coming, and that will be my Bruce Wayne. But whatever. I see, like, again, if I was actually invested in an arc, in a redemption arc about Bruce Wayne, I would not watch this episode and think to myself, why is Bruce Wayne a part of this? Because we haven't seen him in like 7 episodes.
Yeah.
And why did Donna come back from the dead, knew he was about to kill himself, and save him? Like, logic.
Yeah.
I can suspend disbelief left and right as long as I'm invested in the characters. And this show continues to suck all of that investment away and make me overanalyze things. And the fact, Will, you just wrote like a better way this should have played out than the actual writers. And I'm like, that is way too logical right now.
Yeah. This episode had no logic at all. But
I mean, I'll give it to them that it was kind of cool how their interpretation and art direction they took to explain Limbo and illustrate Limbo. But they never got around to explaining why Donna never made it to her stop.
Right.
They never really, I mean, they kind of talked about why Hank hasn't. And now there's all that question, like, neither did his friend who died years ago. And you're just like, oh, okay.
Yeah. But they did have a lot of dialogue, I think, with Hank. He did admit, jumping off the train, and they talked about people jumping off the train, because and there were some other lines of dialogue as far as the fog, and because at first Tim was not sure who he was, and Donna referenced that too. So I think there were nuggets of dialogue within the episode which I did those that journey that Tim, Hank, and Donna went on. Those were the enjoyable bits for me. When they went back to the island, that was where it kind of took me out of the story some, because I felt that the stuff that was going on in Limbo was just, even though logically it made no sense, but I mean, but it's Limbo, so it shouldn't make sense. I mean, there's just some things that you just sort of have to like you said, you have to suspend disbelief and just ride it to where it goes. And it was real, they used this as a real exploration of a proper like closeout for Hank's story, because he was readopted, he was reunited with his adoptive brother. It reaffirmed Donna, and I liked the conversation they had in the bar, where they were talking about how she was really, I mean, it was a very human moment of like, I didn't go out saving people in a glorious way. I just, like, it was at a carnival. I mean, and really got into her mindset as far as like, with all these, the Titans are always kind of like in the shadow of the Justice League and others. So, and it really showed that disdain of that by her, like, I died in a freaking carnival of all things. But then Hank also like recognizing and her being a hero by, like, the first thing she did when those ghouls came in was to jump in between the ghouls and Tim to make sure that he didn't get his soul taken. So there were elements of the episode that I thought were that worked well, and the one strength that I do think they have done really well this season, which even though pacing wise they still just can't crack that at all. But they have done a better job of telling individual stories with these characters instead of like the Arrowverse shows where you have so many characters like in an episode, where it just nobody, it gets frustrating because nobody gets proper space to develop at this point. It's just
right. I just, I can understand what they're doing and what their intent is, not appreciate how they execute.
Mm-hmm.
I honestly got up and was cooking dinner during that conversation. So all I really remember is Donna just saying she doesn't want to go back. And I don't remember any of the conversation about the carnival. It was like it never happened. And then I'm just sitting here like, why doesn't she want to go back? Like, that's just a random thing to say. And there's a reason why she never. Anyway, I could go on. There's like, it's always one step further, like 500 steps back with the writing. And it's just this episode, at the end of the day, going to be forgettable for me. I think in context of this season, it's if I was binge watching this season, this is an episode I would have probably been like, as soon as they made it to the train at the very beginning, I'd be like, okay, I'm just going to pause it here, skip to the next episode, potentially. Because I've done that before, like Stranger Things season 2, season 3, they have these one-off episodes, which I tend to skip because they don't plan them correctly either. It's just that Titans does it like every 3 episodes or something, 4 episodes. But
yeah. Well, this is why we're going to switch to Doom Patrol.
Yeah, we are switching to Doom Patrol.
We'll still talk
about what happens with this, but not in a consistent manner moving forward. Yeah, let's talk Stargirl, because I think that it's interesting. I had such a repulsion to Titans this week because it's a one-off episode. And you were just talking about how Titans like has been able to manage all of these multiple storylines. And for me this week, Stargirl finally stepped back up to that plate and to say, whoa, we do have a large ensemble and we are going to take care of these characters and not just Courtney and Pat. And we had a Yolanda story. Very surprising. It caught me off guard. I was engaged pretty much the entire time. And what I found so genius about this episode is they never answered the question. Like, was this all Eclipso? Was this brainwave?
Yeah.
Was this all in her head? Like, that is an achievement that I've yet to see any of these other shows do, where they don't take that moment at the very end to like just shows like a blue reflection in her eyes or something, or for you to know, because you really don't, with how everything played out. You have your suspicions, but you're really viewing everything from Courtney's perspective.
Yeah. That, there was something. You just captured why I really, and when I was texting with you last night, how they hit this show has hit its stride.
Yeah.
That's what you just said is what did it. And I couldn't put my finger on it, but you just articulated what it is. And that is why I really, really thought that this was probably, if not the best, one of the best, definitely probably one of the best, other than last week's episode was very solid too, but this one really was probably the best episode for me up to this point because of what you just said. And really showing the real, and why Eclipse really captures why Eclipso is such a dangerous opponent. I
think because, and I'm just going to do this comparison because I find it so interesting. Last week's episode was slow and grew up to this big face-off that turned into Eclipso being unleashed and them witnessing who this creature that they've heard so much about is and how terrifying he can be. And then he runs away and everything. And so it's a climactic moment of you're like, okay, Eclipso's out. So you don't want that like next showdown to happen too quickly. So what is the long game here? And it led to this episode about that didn't catch me off guard because they've been in the background exploring Yolanda and her guilt subtly throughout this season.
Yep.
And she has been struggling with a lot of remorse because she was the only one who killed.
Yep.
And I do appreciate the aspect of religion that was brought in, especially from what we knew about her from season 1. And it felt very mature.
Yes, it did.
How they handled it. That conversation between her and the other members, no adults in that room during that conversation, which was really smart because we are watching a very young superhero team who are truly struggling with morality of being a hero when at the end of the day, sometimes you do have to kill the devil.
Yeah. Yeah.
And what does that mean? And I think this is foreshadowing that they're going to figure out a way not to kill Eclipso by the end of this. But to trap him in something else. But to go back to your point too about, I think you were saying before about like, this is what Eclipso does. And that's like this episode, on top of Yolanda's whole guilt trip, there was that creepy scene with Mike and the leeches.
Yep.
And this is an episode I just wish would have been aired on like Halloween.
Yeah, it really does. Yeah, that's a good point. It does have a Halloween feel to it, and and to getting to your point about how the writers handle these characters, because Yolanda's faith is a very integral part of that character, and they touched on it multiple times in the season and in the series. And I like that they did not shy away from that aspect of the character and really deal with these questions of morality within the show, as far as that profound question that all superheroes have to have. And also the larger question of, in order to save the day, do we take a life? Because there's a greater evil in the world. And one of the things I was watching an episode, she's like, God is not here on earth with us. And so are we, so does that give us, she's basically trying to, she's feeling guilty, and she's trying to, get the priest to come around to her, to absolve her of committing this act by trying to justify it, and I really like the way that they wrapped her faith and the philosophical questions as far as being a hero and trying to root out evil, in that it was very, very mature, like you said, with the way they handled it. And then getting to the conversation that Beth and Rick and Yolanda, when they had the blow up where she like calls them all out, Rick was talking all like, yeah, I would have done it. It's like, no, you had the opportunity to take care of Grundy, but you didn't.
Right.
And then, and she talks, to Beth and Beth
and Courtney.
And Courtney. Yeah. And Beth is still in a lot of ways still very naive, even though she's dealing with her own demons. And we're getting closer to a full Beth episode, and it's probably going to come in the next couple where her things are going to come to a head with her parents. Well,
and how this episode ended with creepy child standing outside the window. And which isn't surprising because she has that connection with McNider.
Right.
and Eclipso and McNider have some history.
They have history. And and one of the other things I was and learning more about Stargirl and the characters, and I was seeing an interview with the actress who plays Yolanda, and she notes that in the comics, and I've seen this in other places as well, Eclipso kills Beth and Yolanda, and so. So, of course, now with her leaving the team, giving up being Wildcat, that's another open-ended thing. Like, will she come back to being Wildcat? I can't see them possibly killing two characters of color on the show in 2021. It's just probably not going to fly.
Or just two kids.
Or two kids, yeah. and two kids. But I'm wondering, and every live action always adapts the story to fit the narrative of the live action presentation. So I'm wondering if the death, that we're seeing is not literal deaths of Yolanda and Beth, but and breaking down the new JSA and her resigning as Wildcat and just being basically killing the team by breaking them apart, and moving them away. So I wonder if that's going to be the quote unquote death that we'll see in season 2.
Yeah, I see. This goes back to what I was saying before about they never answered the question, because she didn't just leave the Justice League. She left her part-time job out of nowhere. We never saw her after she walked out.
Right.
Again. And it was said that supposedly her mom or dad were making those phone calls to all these places, and Courtney talked to her. And so I feel as though what's going to happen is she's basically the Eclipso's puppet right now.
Yeah.
And that it's going to further to go back to your point about how he kills both Beth and Yolanda, like, I think both of them are going to get turned into puppets. And that's where the fracturing is going to be and it's going to test really Rick and Courtney to see what they can do to repair, because Rick and Beth have been bonding a lot this season.
Yep.
And Courtney and Yolanda are now at odds. So whatever happens in the next few weeks with Beth is some going to put her at odds with Rick, probably. So, I mean, this season has taken a while to get here, but it's definitely gaining momentum. And I really appreciate that all of the pieces are starting to come together.
Yeah. I agree. Yeah.
And I like where it's going. Like before last week, I was talking about how I didn't like the final scene with the kid and just walking down the middle of a street, middle of the night, laughing. It was really creepy to see that same kid looking up at Beth's window. Yeah. That was creepy. I have no idea why. But it felt like something from a horror movie.
It did. It really did.
Yeah. And the last thing I wanted to note is that they also brought up and were able to insert some brief scenes with Barbara and the fact that she's still working in Jordan's company, and some of the guilt and feelings that she has regarding his death as well. Because it's a bit awkward where this guy tried to kill your daughter, ended up dead by your stepson, killed by your stepson, and you're still working under this idea that he was a great man, so you want to uphold his values in this corporation. Yeah. It's just I thought that was brilliant.
That was. Oh, yeah. I was like, huh. I did have to. Had a quizzical look on my face as I was probably watching the episode, because you're right. I was like, why is she preserving his legacy and talking about the great things of of him and
God, what she
yeah,
has to do right now.
yeah.
It's just like, Courtney, when are you going to wake up and realize you may not have killed Cameron's dad, but you're the reason why he's dead.
Mm-hmm.
And,
yeah, and and also just thinking back to the first season and really the great universe they built up in Blue Valley with this show was seeing Brainwave and Brainwave Jr. return as well, and in a way that really serviced the story again as far as Yolanda's guilt. Because it's one thing to bring people back and then it just kind of, it's more of a gimmick thing. But this really did service the story. And again, to your point, how much is this in her head? How much is this a Calypso? And it's really great storytelling that this team is doing. So, it just feels kind of out of place being on the CW right now.
Yeah. All right. Well, the last show we have to talk about tonight is What If Thor Was an Only Child? I initially was very intrigued, and it took about 5 minutes, and this episode did not work for me. That's all I have to say.
It completely worked. It completely worked for me. Whenever we talked about it a little bit last night, and then just seeing some of the reactions and stuff, it reminded me, and I mentioned this on an earlier podcast we did, it reminded me of how Star Trek fans react to a lot of the old heads and long-term fans react to Lower Decks. Because because I, watching some of the I was able to listen to a couple reviews today, podcasts today and stuff, and people were talking about it, and I was just like, okay, these Marvel fans are like the crazy Star Trek fans who get all bent out of shape when you just have a little bit of fun in there with the universe. And I also thought about something you had mentioned about What If and how the show each week takes elements from, we've had the horror, we've had the comedy, we had the horror show, we had the heartfelt, deep thing with deep philosophical points with Doctor Strange, that episode, which still is, I think, is still probably my favorite one, and the T'Challa one is probably close. Depending on what day you talk to me, it can bounce back and forth. But this episode to me, like, really captured the theme of what if for me, and I did joke. I was like, yeah, I had some of the Thor Ragnarok just from the humor aspects of it. Elements, but it just really was a what if scenario where you had what if Thor's the party dude, and in this universe it was like, okay, I can go with this just for one episode. I mean, I don't think it should be something that should be like followed up in a second season, but for a one-off, I dug it, and I liked and there were like things in it too, like whenever Party Thor was telling Captain Marvel to smile, I couldn't help but think that was just a straight shot at all the like misogynistic jerks who were like, saying Brie Larson didn't smile enough and Captain Marvel. So I mean, it was just so many like little inside things like that also kind of worked. That I was like, yeah, I like this episode.
Yeah. I equate this episode to the first episode. I do. I really do. I feel like What If has started to get into this rhythm of really original storytelling and changing up the dynamics of how these things play out. And so when they first said, what if Thor was an only child? I'm like, oh, okay. Well, what happened to Loki? My baby right now. Let's make sure Loki's okay. And so initially, as it was going on, I'm just like, okay, so no sign of Loki. And then he shows up, and I'm like thinking in my head, I'm like, so essentially in this scenario, Thor is pretty much just allowed to be Thor of Ragnarok for the entire, like, his life and everything. Like, it, I don't know, there was just something about it where I wasn't shocked by how things went. I wasn't like, oh my God, this changes everything. It just, I don't know, it just didn't work. I'm not gonna remember this episode. I didn't even, like, when you told me, like, you felt the same humor from Thor Ragnarok, I was like, did I fall asleep again? I don't remember those jokes. There was just something about this episode where I immediately checked out, and I could never get back into it.
Yeah.
I don't know.
Well, and I think part of it is too, I think we as MCU fans have gotten, like, kind of hardwired into thinking, and maybe you know, check me on this if you think I'm off base, but we've gotten to this mentality or thought groupthink that every single one of these shows or movies have to, like, link into the greater tapestry that Kevin Feige has, like, woven. But sometimes, you know, it may not. This could just be, this is just a one-off, and it's just let's just have some fun and just ride it for what it is. And, you know, like you said, I mean, it may work for some people, it may not, but, you know, for this MCU fan, it worked, because I just sort of, like, after a while, I was like, let me just sit back and just take it in for what it is. And I mean, and I'm glad I did that, because once I got past, like, the knee-jerk thing, like, okay, now how is this going to tie to the multiverse, and how is this going to tie to da-da-da-da, I was able just to fully just enjoy it for what it was.
Yeah, I don't think I was doing that, but
okay. Yeah,
I because you know me, I don't tend to go that far down the geek rabbit hole.
Yeah.
I don't overthink these episodes. They're one-offs. They're cute little stories, but it was lacking originality for me. Just, if this episode had been placed earlier on in the season, I would have probably liked it more. But coming after some of the, I feel like, because you and I had different opinions about the zombie episode.
Yeah.
I feel like this is your zombie episode where I really liked that and you didn't.
Yep.
And now we're just switched, where they're just, for whatever reason, that scenario did not click.
Yeah.
But well, we got 2 more of these left.
Yep.
And that'll be that. But on that note, Will, why don't you tell our listeners where they can find you?
Yes, you can find me and tell me what you thought about my thoughts on the What If episode and all the others at Will M. Polk. That's WILLMPOLK on Twitter.
You can follow me on Twitter at SJ Belmont, SJBELMONT. Please follow our crew on Twitter at CNN Nerd. Friend us on Facebook, follow us on Instagram, and on our website, www.cnnerdpodcast.com. But most importantly, rate, follow, and comment on Apple Podcasts, Spotify, YouTube, Google Podcasts, or wherever you get your podcasts. Good night. Geek out. You're welcome.